This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien and Kathleen O'Sullivan. Well, we don't often have occasion to kick off our podcast with talk of the poultry sector, but unfortunately that is the case this week. If you've been paying attention to national media this week, not to mind agri-media, you will have heard that there have been 2 outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza H5N1 or bird flu at 2 different commercial poultry premises in the past week, one in County Carlow and one in County Meath. Aisling, can you tell us what we know?
Yes, Charles, very concerning developments this week for our poultry sector. So as things stand, as we're recording right now on Thursday afternoon, the Department of Agriculture has confirmed outbreaks of bird flu in 2 commercial turkey flocks. The most recent case was detected in a flock on a premises near Kells in County Meath. And last night, the department said that restriction zones have been established around the affected holding. They comprise a 3-kilometre protection zone and a 10-kilometre surveillance zone, which is in line with national and EU legislation. And that case followed confirmation of the disease in a flock in County Carlow on Tuesday. And again, restriction zones have been put in place around that holding as well. Now, according to the Department of Agriculture, bird flu has been circulating widely in wild birds across the country during the past year. And the H5N1 strain of the virus, which is something you'll commonly hear across all the coverage to do with bird flu, has been confirmed in a number of wild birds across the country with over 40 cases this year to date. And the department has highlighted that outbreaks of bird flu have also been identified in poultry flocks in several European countries and in the UK this year. And as we well know, it has been detected as well in flocks, unfortunately, in Northern Ireland too. And as we previously reported, it caused an outbreak in a captive bird flock in County Cork. And Photo Wildlife Park, which was at the centre of that outbreak, has confirmed this week that it's going to be forced to be closed until the end of November because of the situation there. So very concerning for everybody involved in Photo Wildlife Park as well. Now, in terms of the risk to public health from the strain of bird flu that is circulating, the HSE's Health Protection Surveillance Centre and the European Centre for Disease Control say that that risk is very low. But members of the public are still being advised not to handle sick or dead wild birds and to report any sick or dead wild birds to the Department of Agriculture's Avian Check app. And all flock owners have been reminded this week, regardless of their size, by the department to fully comply with housing and biosecurity regulations, to remain vigilant for signs of the disease and to report any suspicions of bird flu to their local regional veterinary office, or if it's outside of business hours, you can contact the National Disease Emergency Hotline, which is 014928026. And the department said it continues to closely monitor developments and it's engaging with industry stakeholders to take all the necessary measures to mitigate against the risk of bird flu. And Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden yesterday pledged in the Dáil to support Ireland's poultry sector, and he extended his sympathy to the flock owners who've been impacted by the disease. And he said that the most recent outbreak underlines the ongoing presence of avian influenza in wild birds across the country. And he said the introduction of a housing order, which we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail shortly, will further strengthen our national protection measures to help mitigate the ongoing risk. And he wanted to thank poultry keepers for their continued cooperation and strong commitment to maintaining the highest standards of biosecurity during what he called this high risk period. And he believed that working together and following strict biosecurity procedures is the strongest defence to reduce the risk and safeguard our poultry sector.
And Aisling, as you mentioned there, this has inevitably resulted in a closure order for captive birds being issued, whether a commercial, backyard or anything in between, basically. What do flock owners need to know here?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it would have come to as a surprise to anybody involved with poultry. As you said, regardless of how many birds that you keep, that a housing order was probably going to be on the cards this week. So Minister Hayden did confirm yesterday that this compulsory housing order for poultry and captive birds will come into effect from next Monday, November 10th. And he said that due to the increased risk of bird flu to our poultry, he was taking action to reduce the threat to the industry and to our poultry farmers' livelihoods. So from Monday, Charles, all poultry and captive birds must be confined in a secure building to which wild birds cannot gain access. Now, the Department of Agriculture said all reasonable efforts must be made to house the birds, but for legitimate reasons where the welfare of certain types of birds can be influenced by prolonged housing, certain exemptions are in place. And the department said if it's not possible to confine the birds in a secure building, birds must be confined in a manner that prevents their access to other poultry, captive birds, wild birds, and their droppings. Now, as you rightly said, the requirement to house birds applies to small backyard flocks right up to big commercial operators. So everybody with poultry needs to adhere to this from Monday. And under the regulations, it's also not permitted to organise or take part in events which involve the assembly of live birds from different premises. That's, I suppose, the likes of shows, fairs, markets or sales. So all of those are coming to an end as of Monday as well. And that's in order to protect the birds themselves from the risk of becoming infected with the disease. Now, in Northern Ireland, where there has been cases of bird flu reported in counties Tyrone and Fermanagh, the Department of Agriculture there has also moved to introduce a mandatory housing order to protect poultry from bird flu. And the housing measures for all kept birds and poultry are now in effect. But according to Minister Martin Hayden, the housing order will come into place in the south from Monday because he said we need to allow time for our flock owners and commercial operators to put housing in place. And look, again, Charles, the minister emphasised the importance of biosecurity, said it was the single most effective way to prevent the virus from spreading from wild birds into poultry or between poultry flocks as well. And he said that everybody who has poultry or kept birds has to take strict precautions and exercise these highest standards of biosecurity. We did see enhanced biosecurity measures being brought in by the department at the start of the month as well. And Charles, the Irish Farmers Association is calling on poultry producers to house their birds now rather than waiting for a housing order to come into effect on Monday. And the IFA's Poultry Committee Chair, Nigel Sweetnam, said there has to be laser-like focus on biosecurity across the country. And he called on poultry producers to review their biosecurity protocols in detail and ensure that there are no gaps anywhere. And he said housing the birds is an additional protection, but effective biosecurity protocols that minimise the risk are our number one defence. And just to note as well, for any poultry keepers out there, the IFA Poultry Committee is hosting an online information webinar this evening at 8 o'clock, and you can find out more details of that on the IFA website. And Dr. Angus Lane from St. David's Veterinary will be the keynote speaker for the event. And he's going to share expert and practical guidance on biosecurity. He's going to highlight what is working on farms, where gaps are often found, and how to strengthen defences before the virus reaches the door. And Alan Johnson from the National Disease Control Centre is going to provide an update on the current bird flu situation, surveillance efforts and supports available for producers as well. So that is something, if you were interested, tonight at 8 o'clock, the IFA hosting that webinar on bird flu.
Well, we'll move on now. And if it wasn't for the bird flu cases, we would have been starting the podcast this week with the issue of the nitrates derogation. Every day now takes us closer to a decision at EU level as to whether Ireland will retain the derogation. And that level of concern among dairy farmers was on full display at Corran Mart in Fermoy, County Cork this week. Kathleen, you were there for Agriland, so what was the mood?
It was certainly a lively event on Monday night at Corran Mart in Fermoy, and farmers gave a clear message to Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden about the importance of the nitrates derogation for their farms. Around 2,000 farmers turned out for the meeting, organised by the Irish Farmers Association, the IFA. Farmers brought their concerns and they were really seeking clarity and certainty about the derogation after 2025. However, Minister Hayden told them at the meeting that he cannot yet give any guarantees around the fate of Ireland's nitrates derogation. He said, however, the significance of the derogation to this country will be emphasised during an important visit to Ireland this week of the EU Environment Commissioner Jessica Roswell. This visit will take place tomorrow. Minister Hayden told farmers at Carnmart that this Commissioner's visit will focus on engagement to further illustrate Ireland's outdoor grass-based system and the work that is happening across the sector to reduce agriculture's impact on water quality. He said that he cannot give any guarantees around whether Ireland will have a derogation in 2026, but securing it is a key priority. Here is Minister Hayden speaking at the event.
I want to be very clear with everyone here tonight and highlight the challenge that it is to secure derogation. Ireland is the only country with any prospect of having a derogation next year. Whilst the Dutch has written to the Commission seeking a renewal, there has been no visible progress on their application. We have that prospect of looking to be the only country to have a derogation next year because of the work that you have all done to date. The efforts of our farmers to date around water quality have been pivotal to get us to this point. And an additional challenge this time is securing the derogation while proving compliance with the Habitats Directive, an extra layer that we haven't had to face previously.
And that was Minister Martin Hayden speaking at the event in Cork on Monday night. Now, at the event, many farmers spoke about what a loss of the nitrates derogation would mean for their family farms. IFA President Francie Gorman said that the retention of the nitrates derogation is vital for all sectors, not just dairy or those in derogation. He said that the importance of holding on to this derogation cannot be overstated. Here is the IFA President speaking on Monday.
There's absolutely no doubt that this is the single biggest decision that we're going to take on affecting our livestock, our dairy industry, since the abolition of milk quotas. And to be clear, we've worked extremely hard over the course of the last 18 months in particular. We've brought together a stakeholders group comprising of all the main farm organisations, Dairy Industry Ireland, Meat Industry Ireland, to demonstrate common purpose and how important the retention of the derogation is for our sector.
And that was IFA President Francie Gorman speaking there. And I understand, Kathleen, there was quite a lot of young farmers present on the night, which I suppose highlighted the potential long-term impact to the sector of losing the derogation.
The Minister was urged, Charles, by attendees to give certainty to young farmers in particular who are concerned about their future in the sector. MACRA President Josephine O'Neill spoke very passionately about how young farmers in Ireland feel betrayed despite the progress they have achieved and the investments they have made in sustainable farming practices. O'Neill told the event that the potential loss of the derogation after 2025 would have crippling impacts on the financial viability of family farms and threatens the very future of our farming sector, she said. She said that young farmers have built business models on current stocking rates. O'Neill explained that they have taken out loans, expanded their herds, invested in machinery and infrastructure to make their businesses more sustainable and more economically viable, which has all been in a bid to build a career. She said that without the derogation, many fear they may have to reduce stock, reduce output, and in too many cases, question whether farming can even sustain them. Here's Josephine O'Neill speaking at the meeting.
They've done what was asked of them, investing in sustainable farming practices, embracing their role as gatekeepers of the land. But our young farmers now feel betrayed, punished despite the progress they've achieved. If we want young people to stay in farming, they need to know that when they do the right thing, policy will stand by them and not turn against them.
And that was MACRA President Josephine O'Neill speaking on Monday night. Now, as negotiations continue on the nitrates derogation, Minister Martin Hayden has said he is hopeful there can be a vote in December at EU level on the derogation.
Thanks very much for that, Kathleen. Now, central to the nitrates derogation is, of course, Ireland's Nitrates Action Programme, or NAP, and a draft version of Ireland's sixth NAP was put to public consultation last week. One aspect of that draft NAP that has been welcomed by farmers concerns splash plate use on hilly ground. Aisling, can you tell us more about this proposal?
Yes, Charles. So, as we're aware here on the pod, since the start of this year, more farmers were banned from using splash plates to spread slurry on their farms under the Good Agricultural Practice for Protection of Waters, or GAP regulations. Now, those regulations give effect to Ireland's Nitrates Action Programme, which of course aims to protect water against pollution caused by nitrates from agricultural sources. But as we previously spoke about, farmers did raise health and safety concerns about forcing the use of heavier, low-emission slurry spreading equipment or less equipment when up on hilly areas. And essentially, they were talking about the risk that tractors and tankers were at risk of overturning due to the extra weight when travelling on upland areas and hilly ground. Now, the concerns were highlighted at an IFA meeting in Upper Church in County Tipperary in October 2024, where around 450 farmers signed a petition calling for the splash plate ban to be deferred. Now, the concerns were highlighted at a meeting held by the IFA in Upper Church in County Tipperary in October of 2024, where around 450 farmers signed a petition calling for the splash plate ban to be deferred. And the matter was also raised by the Tipperary North IFA chair, Baden Powell, with both Micheál Martin and Simon Harris ahead of the last general election. And Powell and other farmers pointed to a derogation allowing the use of splash plates in upland areas in the southern states of Germany. And it now appears, Charles, as you rightly said, that those concerns raised by the farmers may be addressed in the next NAP. So as you rightly said, the draft version of the 6th NAP, which will run from 2026 until 2029, was recently published by the government and it's currently out for public consultation. And as part of the accompanying draft GAP regulations, it stated that less equipment shall be used for the application of slurry on holdings with a previous year's grassland stocking rate of 100 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare from grazing livestock manure or above prior to export of livestock manure from the holding. But the regulations add that where for operator health and safety reasons it would be inappropriate to comply with that requirement due to land within a grassland parcel sloping steeply, it's permitted to spread cattle slurry close to the ground using a downward facing splash plate. And the draft adds that in this scenario, the occupier must keep a record of such spreading, including the land parcel identification system, the LPIS number, and spreading dates as well. So I spoke with Baden Powell this week about the draft, and he told me that the proposal is a very welcome addition to the draft regulations and he hopes it's part of the final document. And he told me that there has been a number of accidents this year involving farmers using less equipment on higher ground, and he believes that it's a very sensible approach to dealing with the health and safety issues of trying to get slurry out in high ground. And he said there are farmers out there who have to travel highland. Most of them don't have an option. They may not have 50 acres down in the lowlands and they have to try and get their slurry out as best they can. And he feels that this is a workable solution to the issue, and he believes that the way that the draft has been put together, it's not allowing somebody to abuse the system, it's not allowing anybody to do anything wrong. He believes it's all for the good, and he said they're only targeting high fields, and he believes that that's a sensible approach. So obviously Baden Powell and many farmers who were impacted by that splash plate ban earlier this year might be relieved to see that making its way into the final GAP regulations.
Well, the issue of nitrates is obviously of specific concern for the dairy sector, and just while we're on dairy, we'll bring you some news updates from that sector this week. Firstly, Ornua has said that its Purchase Price Index, or PPI, has recorded another decrease, representing an indicative return for October milk of 41 cent per litre. Ornua said that indicative return, which is inclusive of VAT and net of Ornua's costs to market, reflects weaker market returns for the month of October. As well as that, the Global Dairy Trade GDT Index has decreased for the 6th consecutive occasion after the latest trading event this week. The index fell back by a further 2.4% for an average price of €3,273 per metric tonne of product sold. The current run of decreases in the GDT index, which is updated every 2 weeks, stretches back to August 19th, when the index fell by 0.3%. Furthermore, of the 12 most recent GDT trading events back to May 20th, the index has only increased on 2 of those occasions. And lastly now for dairy, the board of the Irish Holstein Friesian Association has given notice to its members that a date for an extraordinary general meeting has been set. The meeting will take place at 2 p.m. on November 27th in the Horse and Jockey Hotel in Thurles, County Tipperary, and will see discussions on the proposed Gen Éireann initiative. But we'll move on now and come to an issue that, while it's a long way off being finalised, will no doubt prove to be as important as the nitrates derogation issue in due course. That's the issue of the next Common Agricultural Policy post-2027. That issue was the topic of conversation for the joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture and Food this week. Aisling, did we learn anything from this committee meeting?
Yes, Charles, as you rightly said, a lot to play for here, and negotiations just at a starting point, as we were told at the committee this week. Now, Cathaoirleach of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture and Food is Deputy Andreas Moynihan, and he said that he and the members of the committee have publicly expressed their concerns at the European Commission's plans to pool the CAP into a single national and regional partnerships fund from the start of the next budget cycle in 2028. And of course, the implications of a proposed smaller CAP budget and how this would impact farmers here and across the EU. And Deputy Moynihan said with Ireland hosting the EU presidency in the second half of next year, there was a strong opportunity to play a crucial role in progressing how the next CAP would look. Now, one of the speakers to address the committee yesterday was Paul Savage, and he's an Assistant Secretary General at the Department of Agriculture. And he said at this stage, the funding announced for CAP is a proposal and it is the start of a long process. And he acknowledged that the Commission's proposals for the next multi-annual financial framework, which of course is the long-term EU budget, which was published in July and September of this year, represents a significant change in how the future CAP would operate. So essentially pillars 1 and 2 would be replaced by this single framework under the national and regional partnership plan, and CAP measures would be delivered as part of that wider structure. And he said this change will have significant implications for Ireland and for how we design and deliver supports for farmers, fishers and rural communities in the next programming period. And he said that for Ireland, 75% of our EU funding comes from CAP, and we need assurances that the new framework would not unduly impact the administration of this funding as well. And the total EU budget, which is proposed at the moment from 2028 to 2034, is approximately €2 trillion. And within this, the Commission has proposed a ring-fenced allocation of 296 billion for CAP. Now, Ireland is earmarked to receive €11.4 billion under what is termed general allocation, and our proposed €8.16 billion CAP allocation would be drawn from that funding pool as well. Now, Paul Savage said that represents an approximate 20 to 24% reduction compared to the current €10.7 billion of ring-fenced CAP funds, which we currently have in Ireland. And he said while the reduction in ring-fenced CAP funding presents challenges for the country, he said there is potential to draw additional funding from the broader funding allocation for CAP, and that there is a lot more to play for. Have a listen.
So at this point, it's not a done deal that it's a 20% cut overall for CAP and that certain people will be sacrificed or certain sectors will be sacrificed. This is purely a proposal at the moment in terms of how the Commission proposes to fund this. There are possibilities there for Member States to secure additional funding for CAP, for instance, from that wider NRP allocation. And we need to look at what scope does that provide us to do exactly that, and what would it mean then in terms of how we go about implementing the CAP in practice.
So, Charles, that was Paul Savage there, the Assistant Secretary General at the Department of Agriculture, telling the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Agriculture this week that we're at the start of a lengthy negotiation process when it comes to the next CAP, and we'll be following it every step of the way here on Agriland.
Before we move on, we'll just direct you to an article on Agriland concerning hazardous waste collection. A total of 6 farm hazardous waste collection days are set to take place across the country over the coming weeks. This follows a trial run last year on 3 sites, with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Climate deciding to extend the number of days to 6. You can check out those dates and locations on that online article. Now, next week we'll see not 1 but 2 protests at Leinster House. Let's take these one at a time, Aisling, and talk about the protest by the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association on the EU Mercosur trade agreement.
Yes, Charles. Well, the ICSA believes that the European Commission's so-called safeguards on the Mercosur trade deal are nothing more than a smokescreen that will do nothing to protect EU farmers. And as we're aware, one of the biggest areas of concern when it comes to this deal for farmers would be that it would allow 99,000 tonnes carcass weight of Mercosur beef, mainly from Brazil, to enter the EU at a much reduced tariff rate of 7.5%. And that quota would be phased in over a 5-year period. And and the EU Commission has said that stringent safeguards will be in place to protect the EU market. But the ICSA President, Sean McNamara, isn't convinced, and he believes that the safeguards would only kick in after a surge of cheap imports or a collapse in price. But by then, he said the damage would have already been done. And he said Irish and EU farmers will be undercut long before Brussels decides to act. And these measures are too slow, too vague and too easy for the Commission to delay. And he said they offer zero real protection for farmers on the ground. Now, there has been rumours circulating, Charles, that the Commission is trying to push the measures through the European Council alone without proposing them for debate at European Parliament level. And the ICSA President said this is outrageous and that the Commission is trying to bypass the Parliament on such a critical issue. And Sean McNamara has called on politicians to stand up and to stop this before irreversible damage is done. Now, this time last year, the association protested at the gates of the Dáil to demand real action from the government on this deal. And Sean McNamara said they're still waiting. So as a result, they're going back out and they're going to be protesting again next Thursday, November 13th, because Sean McNamara said the ICSA believes our politicians are failing us on the issue. Their talk is cheap at this point and our farmers deserve better. So yeah, it'll be, I'm sure, a noisy protest and a big protest all about Mercosur outside gates of Leinster House.
Well, that protest is on the Thursday, but there is an earlier protest on Wednesday where the National Greenways Action Association will take to the streets to protest against the use of compulsory purchase orders. Can you tell us about this one, Aisling?
Yeah, so it is set to be a busy week outside Leinster House. So farmers and landowners from across the country, they're set to protest, Charles, outside the Dáil, as you said, next Wednesday over their concerns about greenway projects across the country. As you said, the protest, it has been organised by the National Greenway Action Association, and it's going to coincide with a meeting of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Transport, which is due to discuss greenways on Wednesday morning. Now, among those expected to address the committee will be Transport Infrastructure Ireland, the Irish Farmers Association, the NGAA, and a representative from the Waterford Greenway. Now, Cleona O'Shea, who's the chair of the National Greenway Action Association, is going to tell the committee, she said to me, that there needs to be more respect and fairness for landowners impacted by greenways. Now, the association was established back in August of 2024, and it now includes 16 groups of landowners and property owners from around the country who are being affected by greenways. She said that everybody are private property owners, and it's not that they're anti-greenways, it's that they're against the process that councils and TII are using to deliver them. And she said that the potential for local authorities to use CPOs to acquire land needed for greenway project has caused much stress and anguish amongst landowners, and the association wants the option of CPOs for greenways to be removed, as they say they're not essential infrastructure. And the association is also calling for the code of practice on greenways to be adhered to by local authorities. And they also believe that greenways should run along national routes rather than going through productive farmland. And Cleona cited that in many cases, former rail lines, which have often become the subject of routes for these greenway projects, have actually been bought by farmers and they're in private ownership and have been incorporated into their holdings. So definitely it'll be an interesting interaction both inside and outside the gates of Leinster House next week.
Well, that almost brings us to the end of today's podcast. Just before we go, we just want to bring you a quick point of note on the Agri-Climate Rural Environment Scheme, or ACRES. 395 farmers are yet to submit their annual declaration for low-emission slurry spreading. The deadline for declarations for the less action under the Agri-Environmental Scheme in respect of 2025 fell on October 31st. The department said that submission of the less declaration after the deadline will cause a delay in the issue of payments to the farmers concerned. And very finally, the 2025 Teagasc National Beef Conference is set to take place at the Raheen Woods Hotel in Athenry, County Galway on Tuesday, November 18th. The theme for this year's event is Beef Farming 2025, Value, Profit and Renewal, so potentially one for the diary there. But that's where we'll leave it for this week. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Kathleen and myself, take care.
This podcast is sponsored by AXA Farm Insurance. AXA offers tailored cover to fit your unique needs, whether it's public liability or protection for your family home, outbuildings or farm vehicles. Based in Athlone, the AXA Farm team of agri-specialists and regional managers work together to ensure you receive the seamless support you need. Switching to AXA is easy thanks to an innovative online service that enables you to quickly and easily find the best cover for your needs. For more information, head to AXA.ie. AXA Insurance Stack is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.